I didn't get the job, guys. I went to the audition, but things didn't work out. I don't know what more I can do. In Karl Marx's Das Kapital, he has a section where he's talking about the poor working conditions of child laborers in Victorian England. He talks about how they sometimes worked 36 hours straight in foundries and textile mills, how they were often on night shift. This had horrifying effects on the physical health of these 9 to 13-year-olds. At one point, he praises the American state of Massachusetts for their progressive legislation, limiting child labor to no more than 10 hours a day and 60 hours per week. England at the time had no such protections. What was more disturbing than their pale skin, brittle bones, and stunted height was their mental deterioration. As an example, he quoted from the 1866 report of the Children's Employment Commission. Here, let me play this clip as I slip into something more appropriate.
Footnote. The degree of culture of these labour powers must naturally be such as appears in the following dialogues with one of the commissioners. William Turner, aged 12. Don't live in England. Think it's a country, but didn't know before. John Morris, age 14. Have heard say that God made the world, and that all the people was drownded but one. Heard say that one was a little bird. William Smith, age 15. God made man, man made woman. Edward Taylor, age 15. Do not know of London. Henry Matthewman, age 17. Had been to chapel, but missed a good many times lately. One name that they preached about was Jesus Christ, but I cannot say any others, and I cannot tell anything about him. He was not killed, but died like other people. He was not the same as other people in some ways, because he was religious in some ways, and others isn't. The devil is a good person. I don't know where he lives. Christ was a wicked man. This girl spelt God as dog, and did not know the name of the Queen. Jeremiah Haynes, aged 12. 4 times 4 is 8, 4 fours are 16. A king is him that has all the money and gold. We have a king, told it is a queen. They call her the Princess Alexandra, told that she married the Queen's son. The Queen's son is the Princess Alexandra. A princess is a man. Children's Employment Commission, 1866.
Note the last kid's statement that the current Queen of England is a king, and that a princess is a man. Back when Karl Marx wrote this was a sign of mental deterioration. These kids were the result of stunning neglect and a lack of mental cultivation. It's bizarre how college graduates now sound much like them, like they have Alzheimer's. John Stuart Mill commented in 1861 that it is in the interest of a tyrant to have a low level of education and a low level of intelligence. But Industrial Revolution kid low? Apparently, if one is to believe Abigail Schreier, author of Irreversible Damage, the transgender craze seducing our daughters. She points out that so-called teachers, who have abandoned educating children for turning them into transhumanist soldiers for the coming oligarchy, have played their part in manipulating young people, in tandem with mass media.
Gender dysphoria, formerly known as gender identity disorder, is characterized by a severe and persistent discomfort in one's biological sex. It typically begins in early childhood, ages 2 to 4, though it may grow more severe in adolescence. But in most cases, nearly 70%, childhood gender dysphoria resolves. Historically, it afflicted a tiny sliver of the population, roughly 0.01%, and almost exclusively boys. Before 2012, in fact, there was no scientific literature on girls ages 11 to 21 ever having developed gender dysphoria at all. In the last decade, that has changed, and dramatically. The Western world has seen a sudden surge of adolescents claiming to have gender dysphoria and self-identifying as transgender. For the first time in medical history, natal girls are not only present among those so identifying, they constitute the majority. Why? What happened? How did an age group that had always been the minority of those afflicted, adolescents, come to form the majority? Perhaps more significantly, why did the sex ratio flip from overwhelmingly boys to majority adolescent girls? The Salem Witch Trials of the 17th century are closer to the mark. So are the nervous disorders of the 18th century and the neurasthenia epidemic of the 19th century. Anorexia nervosa, repressed memory, bulimia, and the cutting contagion in the 20th. One protagonist has led them all, notorious for magnifying and spreading her own psychic pain, the adolescent girl.
Schreier goes a long way in establishing that what we're watching now has its roots in deeper female psychology, which in previous centuries was called hysteria. That term, by the way, derives from the Greek word for womb. It was a subtle euphemism for saying woman craziness. And as tempted as we are to denounce such wrongthink in terms of our modern values, that it overlooks the deeper truth that yes, every few decades a new mania appears and girls jump on the bandwagon, so long as the mass media tells them which bandwagon to jump onto. Something not lost on one poster on Twitter named Mia, who noted a thread about social contagions. In 1972, British psychologist Gerald Russell treated a woman with an unusual eating disorder involving binging and purging. Over the next 7 years, he saw a further 30 women presenting with the same condition. So basically, these women didn't have trendy conditions until the media told them which conditions would generate the most attention for them. The current power structure is leveraging this psychological quirk to weaponize such people. As Lenin said, the perfect revolutionary is a young person with no morals. Encourage vice, mental illness, degeneracy, and you suddenly have a mercenary army, ready, willing, and able to burn down cities. After all, burning down cities gets you attention, doesn't it? The media says so. This is a warning for conservatives, who I don't think fully grasp what they're up against. The average conservative just wants to live and let live. He wants to be left alone. He disastrously assumes that the other side wants to leave him alone. The conservative exists as a sort of lone wolf. Meanwhile, the radical left exists more as an ant colony, taking orders from a centralized hive mind. It reminds me of a passage from Jason Reza Georgiani's book, Lovers of Sophia.
Reptiles have neither the requisite intelligence nor the proper bodily structure for tool use. Moreover, they do not seem to compensate for their dull-wittedness by forming any kind of aggregate intelligence with other members of the same species. Even canine packs are more coordinated. On Earth, social insects are the one type of land-based non-simian life form that is well built for manipulating the environment and that does act as a highly coordinated group to accomplish feats utterly impossible to its individual members. Incredibly rapid and astonishingly complex collective activities have been observed in ant colonies, beehives, and hornet nests. Members of these species act as if they were parts of a single organism. Their group intelligence is qualitatively far greater than that of any of its components. The opposite seems to be true with human beings. While there are some highly intelligent human individuals, large human groups are by comparison stupid to the point of being self-destructive.
Note that last part, stupid to the point of self-destruction. Kind of reminds me of Nietzsche's observation. In individuals, insanity is rare, he said, but in groups, parties, nations, and epochs, it is the rule. Something French social scientist Gustave Le Bon noticed in 1896 in the first book on mass psychology, The Crowd. In studying mob-like behavior, he noticed that individuals lost themselves in large groups, abandoning responsibility and reverting to an animal consciousness. Atrocities a man would never commit on his own, he'll carry out as part of a mob. Le Bon said, mobs don't have a brain, they merely have a spinal column. Republicans think it's enough to be a smart person in isolation, to own the libs in a debate with logic, reason, and evidence. No, you have to organize. Without organization, the ant colony will win. The hypermalleable foot soldiers, whose protoplasm can be molded by remote broadcast from Central Command like some ghoulish Star Trek dystopia where an ancient computer controls the people like puppets, will amass and impose their will on you. Beware the counterfeit conservatives counseling you to remain isolated, disengaged, atomized, the ones who promote weakness and cowardice as if they're virtues. I know this is going to come as some shock to you, but they're working for Team Evil. Their job is to keep you disorganized and powerless. Fight them. If you want to fight what's going on, consider joining the John Birch Society. The John Birch Society has been fighting for more than 60 years to reestablish constitutional government and the freedoms and virtues that made America great in the first place. Unlike billionaire-funded counterfeit conservative groups that just exist on paper or in some virtual world to act as a safety valve where social frustrations can be channeled toward fruitless expressions, the John Birch Society actually has chapters in real communities with real people. Go to jbs.org and find a local chapter in your community now.